Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, Dutch lacers, peasants, vassals, meat sacks, moderate terrorists. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about Russian presence in Syria and something that needs to be brought up more often in all these discussions. So this is going to be another general discussion, not necessarily about a news story, although of course this is relevant because of the dramatic incursion, intervention of Syria or Russia in the Syrian conflict and the resultant shooting down of a Russian jet by Turkey. But what I want to discuss is the fact that other than Assad, who is a legitimate government of Syria, one of the other legitimate players in this game is Russia, because they've had a presence in Syria for 70 years. And this is important to remember when looking at these events, particularly when we have the United States government and corporate media basically depicting Russia as this evil, diabolical interventionist trying to rebuild some empire and seemingly somewhat out of place in Syria. And this just is not the case. And when you look at it from the Russian point of view and the Syrian point of view, which is what we should do, Russia and Syria have been allied for quite some time. The former Soviet Union had connections with Syria while it was still part of the Ottoman Empire and started diplomatic relations in 1944 before Syria even declared independence in 1946. So we also need to look at that fact, the fact that Russia has had a relationship with Syria since 1946, which is a year before Israel was even born. So Russia has been in Syria for a very, very long time. And the Russian naval base, which right now is the only Russian naval base outside of the former Soviet Union structure, is the Russian naval base at Tartus in Syria, which has been there since 1971. So they've had a long and extensive presence there as well. And in the 80s, in the previous Cold War era, that Russia and Syria were aligned and signed numerous cooperation and military agreements. So they solidified and codified this relationship that has been pretty much constant since then. And Russia also has a lot of infrastructure and energy company interests in Syria. So they have a lot of intertwined economic interests, which is also, all these facts I'm bringing up just because even as Americans, we should be able to relate to a country honoring its agreements and working with its allies, and then having economic interests in that country. And that's exactly how Russia relates to Syria. And we also know that Russia has interests there strategically, and why wouldn't they? It's closer to their neighborhood, certainly, than ours. And this is just a natural arrangement. And we also know that, of course, Russia has been supplying weapons to Syria for this entire length of time as well. So for 70 years, Russia has been arming Syria, which of course is not only strategically important, but also economically important. In point in fact, Russia, I would assume, is doing the same thing in Syria that the United States does in a lot of these war zones. They want to test out weapon systems and sell them. And in fact, we have the first use of Russian cruise missiles in combat during this conflict, and a whole array of different weapon systems that are now being delivered to the Syrian government to protect them, particularly in light of the escalation of this war with the Russian jet being shot down. So anyway, just pragmatically, Russia is going to use this scenario to generate some sales and try out some weapon systems. And like I say, they're also just supporting an ally. I would add that Russia has been remarkably restrained. This war going on for quite some time, and them basically supporting their ally, but showing a remarkable restraint and not delivering more sophisticated weapon systems and not intervening. And the fact that they finally found a point where they could do so, causing the least amount of international outcry, kudos to them for their timing. And as we see, Russia is in Syria, and they don't have any games to play like the United States. I've discussed in all of my other videos these games that the United States is apparently playing with ISIS, perhaps their own creation in both Iraq and Syria. And Russia does not have that dilemma. They are going after all ISIS targets in Syria. They're going after all Al Qaeda elements in Syria, and they've turned the tide of the war, apparently, from everything that I'm reading, reports on the ground. And let's also remember that these historical footnotes that get ignored, and that's the fact that in 2012 Russia proposed that Assad step down, and at that point some agreement could have been reached, but the United States, of course, felt like their military efforts were working, supporting the so-called moderate terrorists, all 5 of them, and the United States refused to work with them. At that time, the death toll was only 10,000, so now 200 some odd thousand later. You can look at the fact that Russia actually had a proposal. Kind of reminds me of the time when the Taliban offered to hand over bin Laden if the United States would hold off bombing Afghanistan. The United States turned down the offer and bombed Afghanistan anyway. But that offer was made. And so we find that again that Russia's efforts to deal with the situation early on and diplomatically were refused, and now we have these peace talks going on now with Russia as a player, and of course they'll try and deal with this situation realistically while the United States jockeys to put in another puppet government in Syria. But anyway, I just wanted to bring up something when people are looking at this conflict in Syria and the Russian involvement, and try and put it in some historical context, and particularly when analyzing Russia's position there. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.